Hello everybody and welcome back to this jointly organised Altmetric and Scholastica webinar. It's Altmetrics for journal editors, engagement, influence and authors. We've got a very interesting and exciting panel, I think, lined up for you today, so I hope that you enjoy it very much. There we go. So before we move on, I will introduce all of the speakers just very briefly. I'll really let them talk for themselves for the most part. I myself am Phil Jones. I am head of publisher outreach at Digital Science. We have my role really involves getting myself involved in webinars of this nature. To be honest with you, I work with all the portfolio companies that are a part of Digital Science. We have about 9 of them at the minute, and they aim to accelerate the progress of research throughout every stage of the researcher cycle. And Altmetric is just one of those, and an excellent member of the portfolio. So I'm honoured to be here, and thanks for the invitation, Kat, to present today, or rather to moderate this panel today. But enough about me. We're also going to be hearing from Aaron and Justin, who are both from the American Society of Plastic Surgeons. And what they're going to tell us a little bit about is how they use Altmetrics at their journals. Particularly, they have a case study from 2 authors, and they're going to discuss how social media was used to promote engagement for those particular authors and journal articles. Following on from Aaron and Justin's talk, we're going to have Paul Trevorrow, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's from Wiley, and he's going to be demonstrating how Altmetric feeds into his editorial workflows and reports practices for creating meaningful communities of interest around journal articles and topics. Again, we will have some case studies. 2 articles will be used as case studies, and they will look at successful social media outreach. Chris is a second to last speaker. He is going to be talking about Chris Holmes, I beg your pardon, from SBL Press, and he's going to be talking about how you measure the impact of a journal overall, and interestingly, how that can help them make the case for how that can help a publisher, I should say, make the case for people to either publish in the journal or to subscribe to the journal. So really, we're at the intersection here of editing and perhaps marketing and sales to a certain extent. So that's going to be an interesting twist, I think. And then last but not least, we have Danielle Padua from Scholastica, who are co-organizing this webinar with us and co-sponsoring this webinar. She will be covering 4 ways in which journals can get their feet wet and start tracking Altmetrics today. So we'll have some take-homes that you can really start to work in as soon as you finish the webinar and get back into your office. So thank you all the speakers for agreeing to give your time to speak today, and I'm looking forward to it myself. So just as a little bit of a brief introduction, if anybody's unfamiliar with Altmetrics as a concept, really what Altmetric does is it measures all the ways in which researchers engage, actually I should say all the ways in which researchers, member of the public and the media and everybody who's a member of society engages with scientific research and academic research more broadly, and the attention that research can get, either from news, policy documents, blogs, Wikipedia, social media, the whole gamut of the way that people and society interacts with research. It's a way of measuring the impact, if you like, of research upon society in a much broader way than the traditional citation and impact metrics. It tells much more of the story. So that's the focus of Altmetrics. That's the aim of Altmetrics and Altmetric as well. So one of the things that a lot of people will have seen, everybody will have seen the little Altmetric badges on people's articles. Many of you in the audience who are publishers will undoubtedly have the Altmetric donuts, which you can see over here on the left-hand side with the number and the lovely multicolored logo. Altmetrics, of course, does a little bit more than that, because when you're talking about measuring impact and measuring attention, it's important to see the nature of that attention and to see what's actually being said and the tone of the conversation. So what Altmetric does through what we call the Explorer is it enables people to really drill down and look at the nature of that and look at the original sources, whether that be mainstream news articles, for example, BBC, Le Monde or CNN. It could be blogs, it could be policy documents, or it could be social media and so forth. And so there are tools that exist to really kind of get below that number and really understand how that attention is happening and what is being said. So how is that useful for editors? Well, it allows you to track the activity that's surrounding particular hot topics and popular content. So it allows you to measure in a shorter timescale than traditional citation metrics what's exciting and what's interesting to the audience. It allows you to provide a much more complete picture than traditional citation metrics allow, because you can see whether something's being covered in the news, and you can see whether people are getting excited about something, whether researchers are tweeting about something, whether all the range of possible engagement that can be recorded. It allows you to identify those high-profile authors and those emerging trends. That could be an emerging trend in a particular field, or it could be a geographical location, a new market, particularly in these days of open access, as that is a growing part of the publisher market. It's really interesting to be able to see, and really exciting to be able to look at the different landscapes emerging. And it ensures that you're reaching the right audience. It gives you a return on investment measure, if you like. So what you need to keep in mind throughout this talk today is that Altmetrics should always be viewed in context. Context is key. Altmetrics allows people to signify attention, but not necessarily quality. One of the things I've always thought about all traditional forms of metrics and the new alternative metrics is that you really can only tell whether somebody's talking about something and what they're saying. It doesn't really tell you about the quality of the underlying research that's being done. So that's just something to keep in mind. It really affects all types of metrics. And you can always dig deeper to see what people are actually saying. And also it provides you with an opportunity to engage with the broader community. It's very much a community-driven project. So that's really enough about Altmetric perspective. And at this point, I'm going to hand you on to the presenters. Now, the first person who's going to speak is going to be Aaron Weinstein, and he's from the Journal of American Society of Plastic Surgeons. So I'm going to hand you over now, and hopefully you now will soon see Aaron's screen.
Here we go. So everyone can see Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery Paris Global Open. My name is Aaron Weinstein. I'm the managing editor of both journals, and also here is Dustin Lang. He's our coordinator for digital media and supplements. And we'll just be talking about how our two journals use Altmetrics. So first of all, who are we? We have two journals. We have Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery, which has been around since 1946. It's subscription-based, it's printed online, and we have an iPad app. We publish monthly. Occasionally, we have supplements that bring us to 14 issues per year. We're #1 in plastic surgery and 36 out of 198 in surgery. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. Impact factor, roughly 3, and we have a robust social media presence. Our other journal, Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery Global Open, PRS Global Open, is pretty new. It's launched in 2013, open access, online only, continuously published. And you see I've left ranking blank because all that's coming soon. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more later as well. Ranking coming soon, impact factor coming soon. Also has a growing social media impact, which we'll talk about as well. We're in a very unique situation here because we have the big dog, the #1 in the field, and the newest kid on the block. But both are simultaneously and differently grappling with defining and spreading impact. They both have challenges. So Altmetrics really come into play to help us address those challenges and getting our articles out to a world of readers. And now Dustin will talk a little bit about online engagement.
All right, so can everybody hear me all right? Great. So we participate in all of the traditional online engagement social media tactics, Facebook, Twitter. We also utilize YouTube for monthly videos with the editor-in-chief, as well as video discussions that we invite to discuss different articles and try and lay them out for people that may not be within the plastic surgery field. We also participate by posting 2 different blogs. One is from more senior personnel and plastic surgeons. The other is specifically tailored towards residents, and they discuss everything from what they do on the weekends to applying to different schools. The next thing that we just started as of January was the resident-led PRS Journal Club, and it's been a really neat initiative that features it features the hashtag Plastic Surgery and PRS Journal Club in order to facilitate a live Twitter discussion amongst residents and the general public. And we actually invite the authors of the article to participate within that Twitter discussion. And we've gotten a lot of responses so far. It's been really great. But what does that mean, really? What does all of this mean? Because social media has always had its own way of measuring things. There's likes and likes again, and shares and views. But again, it's hard to really say what that means to us as a journal. There's no revenue. There's no way to really attribute citations either to the articles themselves or via the social media outlets. And there's no real return on investment at this point for the hours spent coordinating with the surgeons, creating the content, and then posting it. What we take away from that is we needed something else, and Altmetrics for us has been that. So instead of these anecdotal shares that are diverse across each social media platform, we have used Altmetrics in a new fashion to provide hard data. So this was one of our Journal Club articles from the February issue, which what we discovered from the January Journal Club podcast is that the ALR graphs in rhinoplasty article reached 88,000 accounts and 600,000 impressions in an 18-hour segment. It pushed the ALR graphs rhinoplasty article to be the most viewed article on PRS Journal, and as of 3/10, it was still currently the most viewed article. Journal Club for February really pushed even further. It boosted the lipofilling article to be the most viewed on PRS Journal again, and then pushed the Altmetric score to be 241, now 255 as of this morning. We had another one that we would like to do as a live social experiment, and so we posted one article this morning to our PRS Journal hashtag at PRS Journal on Twitter, and it had an Altmetric score of 1, and within 30 minutes it has reached an Altmetric score of 4, utilizing Twitter and Facebook and YouTube as well. So we've been able to really utilize this social media revolution to kind of back this and fuel this community. It's been.
And we'll check in at the end of our presentation and let you know how high the score got on that experiment. We ran one the other day that started at 1, and by the end of the day it got up to what, about 15?
Yep.
And you know, these numbers are small compared to other journals, but it's more data to show us what the articles are doing out there. So we use Altmetrics to report to stakeholders on our promotional efforts like Journal Club and Facebook and so other social media avenues like Dustin was discussing. We also use Altmetrics to engage authors. I mean, it seems like the perfect recipe. It's got real-time updating. It can measure the article, but it can also measure videos and other things that aren't currently being measured. It reflects the outcome of your personal efforts. So if you're Dr. Smith and you really want to promote the heck out of your article on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, you can see if your efforts are working. It goes through these non-traditional channels. So kind of taking it out of the quote-unquote stuffy halls of academia and into the digital world where it can reach a doctor on the other side of the world or a member of the public in your own backyard. And it measures that online attention, which if you're into social media, you're probably doing it for the attention. So we think these It's really hard not to be able to hear all the laughs I'm sure are happening on this, but I'm sure all these elements we see as a perfect tool to engage the authors. It appeals to pride that you feel in your own work. It also appeals to any competitiveness that's out there. Hey, how's my article doing against this other institution's article? It's instant, it's interactive, and it's fun, which is something that's very important to us because we know that the academic publishing world, maybe fun isn't the first word that's ascribed to it, but we know it can be, and this is the perfect tool to get people on our website interacting with their own article, interacting with their other articles. And here's what our editor-in-chief, Rod Rorick, had to say on the subject. He said, "We sincerely hope that Altmetrics will be seen and used by authors as an excuse to come back to the site often and engage." And that's really one of the reasons we were so eager and happy to get involved with Altmetrics. We just want authors and readers to come back to the website and look at articles as many times as they want. And whether it's for vanity or competitiveness, pride, or intellectual curiosity, we think Altmetrics is providing the numbers to allow that to happen. So how are we doing on author engagement? Well, we did a couple case studies. This article, you may have remembered hearing about this in the news. It got pretty big a couple years ago. Facial changes caused by smoking. So this doctor's group compared identical twins, one who smoked, one who didn't smoke, to see the effects on facial aging. And you guessed it, the twin that smoked looked a hell of a lot older than the twin who didn't smoke. So this really picked up some great steam and is one of our highest Altmetric scores at 618. So the primary author, Bahman Gairan, who's an ed board member, I wrote him and said, you know, what do you think about Altmetrics? I asked him a few questions, and as you can see, he's an egg. That's because he's not on Twitter. He's not really engaged on social media. He's from an older generation, and he said, I had an idea about Altmetrics, but not in depth. That's kind of what I assumed would be the case, but then what happened was really interesting. He said, this is great. Thanks for sharing it with me. And then immediately he said, I wonder how our other paper did. So that's exactly the reaction we want when dealing with people representing multiple generation and amounts of time and interest in self-promotion of social media. We want to introduce them to it, and then we want to see this immediate pleasure and liking and really getting it. And then it leads to engagement and curiosity about other articles. So here's a case study number 2. This article was a population analysis, basically a survey on the perfect breast. You can feel free to read the article on our website, but basically they asked a whole bunch of people which breast appeals the most aesthetically appealing to you based on nipple position on the breast. So a very public-friendly article. We launched it with a video and a survey that mirrored the study, and it got oh, sorry, we've been speaking for 11 minutes. We're almost done. So Branford and all the authors are very engaged already. What can we take away from them? This guy's got like 35,000 followers on Twitter, and he's already very engaged. So he says, Altmetrics is a fantastic user-friendly platform for quantifying my real-time impact through my research articles. He feels that social media is really the key to involve the public in academic discussions. So we kind of asked him these questions, and unlike the previous author, he had some very specific answers. We said, how do you use Altmetrics? What do you like? What don't you like? So basically what he liked was he likes being able to see where the people who are engaging with his article are from and how his article is faring relative to other articles. He said he doesn't like that he can be lulled into a sense of false security about the real world impact. How is this translating into citations? And that's something that we're grappling with as well. Finally, we have been using Altmetrics to supplement our understanding of true impact. You know, PRS, the journal that's been around since 1946, we've seen a roller coaster ride with our impact factor. When it goes up, everybody cheers, no one asks questions. When it goes down a little bit, it's almost like the Spanish Inquisition. But you know, the slightest change in a decimal point can mean a huge drop in the rankings. So leads people to say, WTF, IF. Altmetrics has been used by us to really explain to our ed board, to explain to our authors that impact factor is not the only sentence when describing the true impact of a journal and the true impact of an article. The little image you see here is a slide that we showed our ed board all about Altmetrics and just educating them and other stakeholders that impact is not just limited to impact factor. We also use Altmetrics to help us define impact for our journal that doesn't have an impact factor. You know, we're discoverable in PubMed, we're archived on PubMed Central, DOAJ, we've applied to Scopus, but a lot of authors say, what's the impact factor? So we don't have one yet, and we sincerely hope and believe we will get one soon. But in the time being, we can use Altmetrics to communicate hard data about how these articles are faring. And the open access model is one that can truly benefit from Altmetrics because the articles are freely accessible anywhere and circulation through Altmetrics. So how are we using Altmetrics? We're using it, and you guys can use this if you want to. Altmetrics, we really think, is filling the hole in the conversation on impact through author engagement, through completing the conversation on true impact, and to report to our stakeholders. So that is all we have to say on the subject. So with that, we will pass off control to Paul. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron and Dustin. That was great. So I'll start with my caveats for today's session. I'll not be discussing portfolio and title analysis in this webinar. While these are insightful for journal editors and valuable for stakeholder reporting, they've been covered within previous Altmetric webinars and also on the Altmetric YouTube channel. A bit about my position. I'm not a marketer. Neither do I have a grand view of other editors' approaches to Altmetric. I'm certainly going to learn some things from today's webinar, I'm sure. What I am interested in is using Altmetric as a tool to develop communities of interest. By that I mean developing a network of reciprocity where the information I supply to the network is useful to the participants and the information the participants supply is useful to me. So the following is very much a perspective piece, and I will walk through a few examples of how I approach Altmetric using some interesting case studies. The first case study I'd like to discuss centers around Maria Sharapova's public announcement regarding her positive meldonium test. I think what's interesting in this case is that we have a media event creating a network that tracks back to the research. The broad attention this announcement received brought forth early research into meldonium's potential performance enhancing properties and also its detection strategies. And such is the focus of a key article on this topic published in Drug Testing and Analysis. Over the 24 hours following the announcement, this paper became one of the key articles in the debate. Once aware of the news story, I tracked down the paper in the Wiley Online Library and clicked the convenient AM button score here and linked out to Altmetric. So as a matter of practice, I typically check two sections of the Altmetric page to ascertain the significance of the donor. The score in context function on the summary page and the more function in the about this score section. From here I can see that this score is significant. It has the second highest score for the journal and is the top 5 of all outputs scored by Altmetric. I mean, there's a wealth of information that you can extract from the landing page, and I'll not cover all of this here, but I will take you through a few steps in building a community of interest. I would argue that the fundamentals are typically the same regardless of the social media outlets. So, reviewing the outlets, first thing I would probably look at is Wikipedia. It's in my attempt to contextualize the reporting within the media itself. So I'll click on the Wikipedia link, and this will give me some context both into the subject and also reveal how the article is presented. In the wiki page, I'll perform a quick search for the cited journal, and here I can see that the study is cited as a cornerstone paper in the performance enhancement debate. Now at this point, it's probably my suspicion that this wiki page was a popular access point during the media frenzy, directing users to the original study. Typically, with a case like this, I would look at the news articles to see how the source material is being used, much like Phil was talking about context earlier. And after spot checking some of these articles, I start to get the impression that the source article is mostly cited for its reporting of meldonium's performance enhancing potential, much as it is in Wikipedia, rather than the actual focus of the research, which was the viability of the detection methodology. So one of the central themes of drug testing analysis is the development of detection methods for controversial substances. And we need to keep this in focus when making linkages in order to connect meaningful communities of interest. As I mentioned earlier, the aim here is to make reciprocal links along which useful information is shared. And so it's important to choose those connections that are most likely to be of interest in your information and reciprocally you interested in theirs. As one might expect with such a mediagenic case as this, many of the commentaries are opinion pieces. These are largely extraneous to the focus of the research we publish, and while they fuel the debate, I'm really only interested in linking to those who are engaging with the scientific discourse, like this one, for example. Thereafter follows a process of further contextualizing and filtering in order to make these meaningful connections. Typically, I do this on the fly and link out to the tweets page where I make a judgment on their bio, ascertaining whether we are likely to be interested in common content. Once the assessment is complete, I might follow them and perhaps retweet some of their posts that are of interest. Now, why is this useful? Well, in terms of my editorial duties, surveying the landscape in this way helps to uncover topics that spark ideas for commissioning. It's quicker to publish a tweet than a research paper, and so one can potentially get an early glimpse into an emerging area of interest. So in this way, I'm using Altmetric as a prospecting tool rather than a promotional one. So with this case specifically, superficially, the donut implies that there are abundant connections to be made, and there certainly are. But if we contextualize these, we see that making meaningful connections is not as straightforward with a donut of this magnitude. A process of contextualizing and filtering is required. Now I've discussed my general approach, let's apply this thinking to something a little more niche. So one of the great things about Altmetric is that a community is gathered around an article of interest. In this respect, a portion of the community is self-defined. Now, this can offer a great springboard for networking, but you have to keep in mind that we're only looking at a section or a subsection of a larger community, and within that, we only see a group of commentators that are engaging in these forms of social media. So here we have an example of a more niche topic within the journal Magnetic Resonance in Chemistry. And while the donut score of 33 may seem rather small in relation to the previous example, comparisons across titles here may not be appropriate. They're in entirely different fields with different populations. To put this article in context at the title level, this paper has the highest Altmetric score in the journal. I think what is significant here is the actual quality of the interacting individuals. While the paper has simply received 30 tweets from 22 users, these users appear to be directly engaged with the scientific content, which is what we want. As such, the ability to make meaningful connections is less problematic. I can estimate with a degree of certainty that these individuals are likely to be receptive of the type of content the journal provides. So here simply I've provided two case studies, both are very different in their subject and their reception. The take-home message, I think, from these two examples is that in attempting to capture communities of interest, the abundance of interactions may not be proportionate to how meaningful they are. For example, it could be that a tweet from an influential member of the community yields a more meaningful connection than a mention in a newspaper, even though they're scored differently. So, for the last portion of my session, I will discuss an outreach initiative I developed with the journal Magnetic Resonance in Chemistry. So, traditionally, titles have editors who are supported by the larger editorial board. But here I've created a new class of editorial board membership. And in this new structure, I've introduced an associate editorial board. Now, this group is comprised of individuals between postdoc and associate professor level. These are the editors of the future, and these are the socially media savvy people. And there are two associates, Maria and Laura, who focus predominantly on the journal's social media presence. And what a fine job they've done. As you can see here, there is, however, much more to come. As with any social media activity, it is an ongoing effort. I think the rationale for these social media pages around this journal is actually not to influence Altmetric scores, but to provide a platform for highlighting content, enabling discussion, and networking in a convenient and democratic space. So that any influence that these have on the Altmetric score is rather consequential rather than intentional. So that's my quick session, and to quickly summarize, I've demonstrated how I use Altmetric to make meaningful connections and demonstrated a successful outreach initiative. I think the overriding take-home message here is that context is all important in order to use the data meaningfully. And that concludes my session. I hope this has been useful. I will now pass the session over to Chris, and I look forward to later questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Paul, and Justin and Aaron, or Dustin and Aaron, for those presentations. I thought they were very interesting, and my screen should be coming up shortly now, and I'll go ahead and present. Again, as was said at the beginning, my name is Chris Holmes. I am the managing editor for the Journal of Biblical Literature, which is produced by the SBL Press, Society of Biblical Literature Press. Very different type of journal than the journals discussed earlier in the presentation, in the webinar, but I think that there's a lot of interesting connections to be made, and I know that I've learned a lot. So my presentation will actually focus on using impact factors beyond Altmetrics that are have so far been very beneficial for a smaller journal like the one I am the managing editor for. So a brief overview of my presentation. First of all, I want to introduce just a little bit about our journal and our interest in analyzing impact. Then say a word about the two tools that I've made the most use of, the SJR Indicator and Google Scholar Metrics. And then briefly comment on a so what I'm hoping to be able to communicate with these findings, at least initially. So the Journal of Biblical Literature is just over 130 years old. It's published quarterly. We publish anywhere between 45 and 50 articles per year. We have over 2,300 paid subscriptions, both individual and institutional subscriptions. And at least according to our website, we're billed as the flagship journal in the field of biblical studies. And for our purposes, that includes material or analysis of primary texts in the Hebrew Bible as well as the New Testament, but also a wide range of cognate literatures and languages from the ancient Near Eastern world all the way through the early Roman Empire. So a fairly broad set of interests, albeit very specialized often. So our interest in analyzing impact primarily was to identify peer journals for comparison. There are a number of journals that do similar things, and we wanted to know how we compare with them, where are we stronger, maybe they are weak, or vice versa. And then, of course, to clarify what makes JBL a flagship journal beyond sort of anecdotal or that we're the oldest or anything like that. And then finally, if there's a way for us to track trends in recent scholarship, again, it's fairly internally for other publishing opportunities with SBL Press is something of what motivated us to look into impact. So the first tool that I've been using is the SJR Indicator, and that just is the SC Imago Journal and Country Rank. So SJR is short for that. Each year, the folks there assign an SJR number to each journal that measures the overall impact, influence, and prestige of the journal. And they organize these numbers or these journals by both subject area and category. As far as I can tell, they provide data for nearly 23,000 journals, which includes 27 subject areas and dozens of subject categories. For my purposes as the managing editor of JBL, I'm most interested in the subject area Arts and Humanities, which covers over 3,300 journals, and the category of Religious Studies, which includes 358 journals. So each report for a journal includes a number of important, or at least potential, data points for impact. They provide the SJR number, which is relative to other subject and categories, and this is the number that they have created using their own system of analytics that combines a number of other data points that I'll discuss just in a few seconds. It provides the H index, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, but essentially tracks the minimum number of articles that have been cited a minimum number of times. So an H index of 4 would say that there were at least 4 articles that have been cited 4 times, at least 4 times. And that's for the life of the reported data. And that's just a caveat here with the SJR indicator that not all journals have the same number of years covered. And so the H index might be skewed because of that. And then each report for each journal provides a number of graphs that are related to citations and international collaboration. Here are just a few of the screenshots of those graphs. Obviously, don't have time to go into these in detail, but you can see a number here that have to do with citation, and then some international collaboration as well. So here is an example of, based on the year 2014, you can search based on years. So most recently, the data is 2014. And the subject category is Religious Studies, again, just over 358 journals in that category. And each journal is then assigned an SJR number here in this column here, the H index, the total number of articles for the past year and the 3 previous years. That's these 2 columns here. The total number of references in articles over 3 years. And then various citation data, so total cites, citable documents, and cites per document, which this latter column is typically viewed as an important indicator of impact. So how do we use the SJR indicator? We've used it to identify peer journals. So, there is no objective way to do this, but by looking at the 358 religious studies journals, I've identified 39 journals that are broadly concerned with the field of biblical studies. Some of these are broader, some of these are narrower, but they're generally peer journals. And we're beginning to clarify factors that make JBL a flagship journal, again, beyond sort of anecdotal evidence. For our purposes, that means that we have the highest SJR number of all biblical studies journals, and at least in 2014, the 20th highest in all of religious studies. We have the 2nd highest H index number among biblical studies journals, the 2nd highest average citations per document in a 2-year period, and the highest number of references included among biblical studies journals, and the 4th highest of all religious studies journals. Again, the caveat is our numbers are probably much smaller than some other journals that are in different subject areas, but as other presenters have said, the context is key, and the SJR indicator helps us identify at least part of that context that we're interested in investigating. So the second tool that we use, I'm going to be much briefer on this analysis, is Google Scholar Metrics, and you can see if on Google Scholar you log in and you can see the metrics button up there. Essentially, metrics gauges the visibility and influence of recent articles. For our journal, this includes the H5 index, which is essentially the H index, but just for the last 5 years. So again, the minimum number of articles that have been cited a minimum number of times over a 5-year period. But what's really helpful about Google Metrics is that it allows you to see the articles that make up the H5 index, and to see where they've been cited, which for our purposes is important. This is a screenshot of our journal on Google Metrics, and so we have an H5 index of 9. And here you see listed the different articles that make up that H index and the number of years that number of times they've been cited and the years that they were published. And so, again, this gives us more data for comparison, although not all of the journals that are on SJR are available on Google Metrics. It allows us to track trends in scholarship. So, which articles are being cited most frequently? What subcategories do these articles represent, and where are they being cited? Are they being cited in other journals or in print publications? So for us, the so what, at least right now, as the new managing editor, this is mostly for internal use. We're trying to get a sense of what we do well and how we're having it. But in addition to that, we hope to communicate findings that to potential authors why they might publish with JBL. If we have the highest SJR number and one of the highest H index numbers, it suggests that people are using consulting and building off of articles in JBL, and that would motivate them perhaps to be a part of our journal. The subscribers, I think that we're using this impact to suggest why they should subscribe to JBL. Again, there's some visibility with our articles, but also particularly with the references, the number of references included in the JBL article or JBL issue, it becomes a first stop for research, and most of our research is very up to date. And so to subscribers and then to researchers, the data is beginning to allow us to say that JBL should be a first stop for many people in conducting their own research, and therefore is a significant tool, both for researchers, subscribers, and potential authors.
So I'd like to thank all of our speakers again for some excellent presentations. Great to see so much interest in Altmetric. So thank you very much for attending, and see you next time.